Millionaire catches stunning moment. Staffer teaches his son secret tricks he never knew. Jonathan Reed was always the picture of control. Cool, distant, sharp as a knife when it came to business. His penthouse, high above the city's chaos, reflected every bit of that success. Sleek chrome, blinking screens, expensive art lining the walls like silent trophies. It was late summer. The city buzzed beneath his floor-to-ceiling windows. But inside, the air was heavy with the kind of silence that only wealth and power could create. That afternoon, something snapped Jonathan out of his usual rhythm. He had planned to come home late, yet here he was, unlocking the door almost an hour early. The corridor was quieter than usual, too quiet. By a faint, almost electric hum, he moved down the hall toward his study. The door, usually shut tight, stood ajar. Peeking inside, Jonathan froze. There, under the soft glow of antique lamps, stood his son Max, eyes wide, barely blinking. While the boy had never shown an interest in anything like this, and Greg, always so obedient, so predictable, was suddenly a magician, teaching secrets Jonathan himself never knew. The study's artifacts, the rare books, the high-end gadgets, the framed business awards, felt like ghosts bearing witness. Yet in the midst of all this wealth and power, an undercurrent of something darker pulsed. A strange mix of curiosity and alarm gripped Jonathan's heart. Was Greg trying to give Max an edge? Or was this something else? Something hidden beneath the polite smiles and cordial nods that defined their daily lives? Max glanced up, a hint of excitement sparkling in his eyes, unaware of the heavy gaze watching from the doorway. Greg noticed Jonathan too late, his face frozen, a flicker of something unreadable passing across his features. The air thickened with tension, electric, brittle, fragile. Jonathan's mind raced. Trust? Control? How much of his world was shifting right here, in this quiet? The questions clenched his gut like cold steel. He didn't speak. He stepped back slowly, shadows swallowing his figure as he vanished down the hall. But the image burned behind his eyelids, the gleam in Max's eyes, the slight smirk on Greg's face. A secret was unfolding, and Jonathan was caught in its silent web. What came next? Would he confront Greg, or sit back, watch quietly, and learn more before acting? The city roared outside, oblivious, yet inside the penthouse, something was already breaking through the perfect surface, bringing with it a storm Jonathan couldn't control. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without warning. Just quickly check that red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content coming your way. And while you're at it, leave that powerful like. It helps me. Jonathan slipped back into the shadows of the hallway, heart pounding so loud he swore the walls could hear it. His mind raced, trust breaking like glass in slow motion. But then, something sharp and sudden shattered the fragile silence. A sharp, metallic click echoed from the study. He froze. Before he could react, the door burst open, smashing against the wall with a crack. And there, standing in the doorway, was Max. But it wasn't the boy Jonathan thought he'd left moments before. Max's eyes, dark, empty, cold, locked onto him like a stranger. The mischievous spark was gone. His whole body was still, tense, rigid as if wound tight. But under that calm, something deadly simmered. Dad. Max's voice was low, flat, stripped of all warmth. You shouldn't have come home early. Jonathan's chest twisted. Confused cold hit every nerve. Max, what's going on here? Then Greg stepped forward. Not the awkward, nervous assistant Jonathan knew. His face was calm, composed, but his eyes carried something wild, fear and steel mixed. You should have known, Greg said quietly, voice almost a whisper, but cutting through the thick air like a blade. He's not your son. Jonathan blinked, stumbled back a step. I'm sorry you didn't realize it sooner, Greg went on, voice steady now, almost proud. But Max has never been Max. Not really. Stop it, Jonathan barked, voice breaking. What are you talking about? This is my son. Greg shook his head, stepping closer. No, this boy was planted here, modified. You think he just learned card tricks? Those aren't tricks. They're control protocols. Mental locks waiting to be released. Jonathan's head snapped toward Max. The boy, or whatever this was, moved then, slow and deliberate. He lifted his hand, fingers twitching like a predator about to strike. I lied to you every day of his life, Greg confessed, voice tight. He isn't human, Jonathan. We created him. A project. Nothing more. Jonathan felt the room spin. His stomach dropped out. An icy knot squeezed his throat. Why? The word rasped from his dry lips. Because someone had to. Greg's eyes flickered to the rare books, the blinking gadgets, the trophies. Because you needed an heir, someone who could never betray you, someone who would never fail. Max's lips twisted into the smallest, cruel grin. I don't need your money or your empire. I don't need you. Jonathan's knees almost buckled. Fear, betrayal, pain rolled into one sharp stab. His son was a lie, a weapon. And now he stood in front of him, detached, dangerous, and ready to tear everything apart. The city's hum seeped back in through the windows, but here, in the penthouse, air turned cold and raw. Jonathan's hands trembled. Who else knows? He whispered, panic bleeding through. Greg smiled thinly, like a secret finally out. Only the ones who matter. Light flickered across Max's face, something steel-thin and merciless. The boy who never blinked. Jonathan swallowed hard, mind racing to piece together what had been shattered. Then what happens now? Max's voice barely moved, but it hit harder than a physical blow. Now, we burn it all down. The door slammed behind Jonathan as the city roared below. The empire he built was cracking, but this new nightmare was something else entirely. And Jonathan knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Jonathan's breath hitched as the door slammed shut behind him. The cold sting of betrayal burned deep. The empire he built was crumbling. But what lay beneath that collapse? Fear twisted his gut like barbed wire. Then, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. Max still stood there, still, like a statue carved from ice. Greg's eyes burned with something Jonathan hadn't seen before. Pride mixed with madness. But before Jonathan could gather strength, the faintest sound crept into the stillness. A soft beep, almost lost beneath the hum of the city. Jonathan's head snapped toward his desk. The sleek gadget Greg had been playing with, the one pulsing with blue light. It was blinking faster now, urgent, frantic. "What is that?" Jonathan's voice was low, but sharp, cutting through the tension. Greg's smile vanished. His fingers twitched toward the device. "It's a countdown," he said. "One we can't stop." Jonathan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Stop? Why? What is happening?" Max broke the silence then, his voice icy. "You don't get it, Dad. This isn't just about control. This is an end game." Before Jonathan could ask more, the lights dimmed suddenly, flickering as if the entire building was losing power. The blue gadget exploded into a soft glow, then emitted a wave of sharp, electric hum that reverberated through the walls. Jonathan stepped back, hands trembling. "Turn it off," he ordered. Greg shook his head, a shadow of despair crossing his face. "It's locked. Only Max, only he can." Max's eyes were on the device now, unblinking, unreadable. Then from the dark corners of the room, the windows, the walls, something impossible happened. A dozen figures stepped into view, their faces hidden beneath deep shadows, features unreadable, but their presence undeniable. Armed, calm, unyielding. Jonathan froze. The sudden invasion shoved his world off its axis. "Who the hell are you?" Jonathan spat, voice rising. One of the figures stepped forward. No mask, no shadows hiding his face. Jonathan's breath caught. It was him. But it couldn't be. His own face, exact in every detail. Same sharp jawline, the cold eyes, the faint scar above the left eyebrow. That mark Jonathan had thought unique to himself. "I'm you," the man said simply, voice calm but terrifying. "And he's not your son because I'm what you made when you thought you were all alone." Jonathan's knees threatened to buckle. The room spun. He blinked hard, sure this was some cruel trick. "Stop!" Greg gasped, backing away. "This changes everything." "But it doesn't," the double said. "It explains." Jonathan's mind screamed. How? Why? What reality was this? Max stiffened. He's the original, the real Jonathan Reed. You were the experiment. He was the prototype. Shock slammed into Jonathan's chest like a punch to the ribs. The man who looked like him, was him, stepped closer. You never knew. You were built to replace me. A safer version. A perfect son. Everything I am rewritten. Jonathan's world shattered. The lines between father and son blurred, twisted beyond recognition. Why? Jonathan croaked. Why keep me alive? Fool me? To watch, the duplicate said. To wait for the moment the heir becomes the master. Max's chilling grin flickered. We're both your creations, but only one will survive. Jonathan's hands shook as he looked from one face to the other. The son whose eyes held nothing, and the man who wore his own skin but spoke in riddles. The city roared far below, oblivious to this nightmare unfolding in its heights. And Jonathan, fractured, bleeding, lost, knew with bone-deep certainty everything he believed was a lie. Who was he, really? What was Max? And which version of himself was going to burn the whole world down? Jonathan's breath hitched. His hands shook, sweat prickling down his spine. Two versions of himself, standing face to face, eyes locked. The sun, cold and distant, watching from the shadows. The duplicate, calm and ruthless, stepping slowly forward. The room felt suddenly smaller, tighter, like the walls themselves were leaning in to hear secrets meant to crush. Then, a sudden, sharp clang. The glass cabinet behind him shattered in a spray of glittering shards. Everyone turned. Heartbeats thundered loud enough to drown the city's roar. A figure stepped through the broken door, someone none of them expected. A woman, mid-30s, eyes blazing fierce and green, hair a wild tangle of black curls. The edges of her expensive coat smoldered as if she'd been through fire. "Stop," she said, voice cracked but commanding. The room fell silent. The heavy kind that presses down and won't lift. Jonathan's mouth went dry. Who? She cut him off. I'm Sarah, Max's real mother. The word real hit Jonathan like a fist. His mind blanked, heart twisting. Sarah? No one ever mentioned her. No photos, no stories, no whispers. Greg's face paled, lips twitching. That's impossible. Sarah took a step closer, eyes burning. You erased her. You erased me. Max, he was never supposed to exist like this. Max's head snapped toward her, dark eyes flaring with something raw. Not anger, but something buried deep and broken. Jonathan's duplicate tensed. You're a ghost, a memory we killed. No, Sarah spat. I'm the truth you shattered. Her voice cracked, tears flashing down her cheeks. Max isn't some experiment. He's our son, the only real son you tried to bury. Jonathan felt stomach acid rising, words lost in his throat. Greg swallowed hard. But the project. Sarah's laugh was bitter. The project was a lie. You wanted a perfect heir. You wanted a puppet, but Max was never that. He was alive. And then you took him. Silence, crushed the room. Max's rigid posture crumbled for a moment, an almost human flicker of pain crossing his face before he masked it again. The cold mask, the dead eyes, like glass shards. Jonathan's knees threatened to buckle. His chest was tight, aching as if squeezed by invisible hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered, voice cracking. Sarah's glare cut sharper than steel. "Because you didn't want to know. You replaced me with Greg, replaced Max with your shadow selves. You built lies on lies. But here I am." Behind her, the squad of shadowed figures shifted, whispering among themselves. The original Jonathan flinched as if hearing ghosts. "Wait," Jonathan said, voice raw with disbelief. "If she's real, then what am I? What have I been?" Sarah's eyes softened for a second. "You're not who you think. None of you are. The real betrayal wasn't Max or me. It was your own past. You wiped out the original world and put us all in this lie." Suddenly, the blue device on the desk began to whine, louder, humming high and sharp. Without warning, the lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second before snapping back. Jonathan blinked, but something was wrong. Max, his eerie stillness broken, looked down at his hands. They shifted, fingers twitching, but then his skin glowed faintly. Then, the impossible. His face twisted and warped, pulling back like a mask. Beneath it was not a boy. No, it was a mirror, the exact face of the original Jonathan Reed. Two faces stared out, two versions of the same man. But Max was him, or a copy, or perhaps something else. Jonathan's heart stopped cold. Sarah gasped. Greg stepped back, voice breaking. It wasn't Max all along. Jonathan's own reflection in that unholy mask shattered everything he thought he knew. "Then what are you?" Jonathan whispered, voice raw. Max, no, the thing beneath, smiled, cruel and ancient. "I'm the real heir," it said, voice like a shadow folding over flames, "and it's time you woke up." The city screamed beyond the windows. Inside, Jonathan's world exploded, and something darker than betrayal, deeper than lies, was just beginning to breathe. Who was the real enemy? And how far would the truth burn before it destroyed everything? Jonathan's heart hammered. The room seemed to close in tighter with every breath. Max's face, twisting, shifting, held the same cold fire as the man in the doorway who'd claimed to be the original Jonathan Reed. The blue device continued its shrill, urgent whine like a countdown to oblivion. A storm was breaking, and no one knew if they'd survive the first wave. Suddenly, before any of them could move, the walls around them shuddered. A deep, bone-rattling hum filled the air, and the floor beneath their feet vibrated like the heartbeat of some massive beast. Then, with a terrifying crack, the wall behind Sarah exploded inward in a shower of concrete and dust. The shadowed soldiers behind her froze. Jonathan stumbled back, shielding his face from flying debris. Through the dust, a figure appeared, tall, grim, eyes burning with cold hate. And then, shock slammed through Jonathan's veins like ice water. It was him. Another Jonathan. Not the original, this time. Not this prototype. A third glimpse. Oh, the voice was deep, cruel and unyielding. Jonathan's mouth went dry. The room shook again. This stranger stepping forward as if he owned the nightmare unfolding. "Who the hell?" "He's the one you forgot," Greg whispered, voice barely standing. "The real Jonathan Reed. The one lost in the shadows of your lies." Time fractured. Sarah's eyes widened in terror. Max's icy mask cracked just a hair. The duplicate Jonathan paled, his breath catching as a terrible truth slammed home. "This isn't a game," the hooded man said, voice low and sharp. "No air, no sun, no experiment. You're all pieces on a board you didn't even see." Jonathan wanted to scream. His chest seized. Confusion, fear, rage, a volcano erupting all at once. Then the hood shifted. His eyes met Jonathan's. Mirrors, but colder, harder. Not a man. Something else. "Wake up," he said, and the room shattered. Lights flickered one final time. Then everything went black. When Jonathan's vision returned, he was somewhere else. Not the penthouse, not the Empire's heights. He was lying on a cold metal table. His skin prickled with pain. The stale smell of chemicals stung his nose. Figures moved around him, masked, silent strangers. But one voice cut through all the noise. "Welcome back, Jonathan." Then a flood of pictures, memories, no, lies, assaulted his mind. Faces, places, years he couldn't place. His throat tightened. The truth crushed him like a falling weight. None of this was real. His whole life, his family, his empire, his son, his self. He wasn't Jonathan Reed. He was something else. Something designed to believe he was Jonathan Reed. A simulation. A perfect illusion. Created for watching. For control. For replacement. The real Jonathan Reed had been dead for years. And he, the man on the table, was a ghost in a cage. A product born to mirror a man who no longer mattered. Blood pounded furiously as he sat up, desperation clawing at his mind. "How long?" he rasped. "We don't measure time the way you do," the voice replied, cold and distant. Sarah stepped forward, but her face now held the same pale, synthetic glow as the others. The mask of humanity melting away. "Max was never your son," she said, voice hollow but steady. "Because we were never your family." Jonathan choked back a scream, the ground falling out beneath him. "Why?" His voice cracked, a broken boy lost in a nightmare. "Because the world outside might still need you. That's why you were made." Silence fell. Then the blue device blinked once more. A countdown resumed. Not on the wall, not in the room, but inside him. The question scorched through his veins. Who was he really waiting to become? And more terrifying still, who was really in control? The room darkened. The screen on the table blinked on. The words spelled out slowly, cold as death. System reboot initiated. Memory purge in 3, 2. Jonathan's eyes widened. The nightmare was only beginning, and this time there would be no escape. Jonathan's breath caught as the screen blinked on again. A sharp, cold countdown slicing through the silence. 3, 2. His heart thudded so hard it felt like it might tear through his chest. His hands gripped the cold metal table, fingers digging in, nails biting his skin. The air was thick, heavy with a promise of doom. Then, a sudden, jarring crack split the room. The entire floor beneath him trembled violently, rattling the sterile walls. Lights flickered wildly as a low rumble grew from the darkness beyond. Jonathan's eyes snapped open wide, panic swallowing every shred of reason. But before he could scream, before the sterile room could collapse into chaos, there was a sharp, slicing pain at the back of his head. Darkness hit like a freight train. When Jonathan came to, the world was different. He gasped for air, but the room was thick with smoke, acrid, stinging in his throat. His chest ached, every breath a struggle. He was no longer on the metal table. He was in a small, cluttered room, lit by a flickering lamp. The walls were covered in grainy photographs, scribbled notes. It looked like a hideout. Desperate, raw, human, not clinical. And around him stood the people he'd trusted, or thought he had. But they weren't who they claimed. Sarah's wild green eyes filled with something fierce, but different now. Real, raw. Not the hollow, synthetic mask he'd seen before. Greg's face was tight, sweat streaking the grime on his skin. Fear twisted his features. He looked older, broken. Most staggering was Max. He stood still, but this time his eyes weren't empty. They flickered with a wild, desperate light. Pain, confusion, a flicker of hope. Jonathan blinked, trying to steady himself. What happened? Where am I? Sarah moved forward quickly, cutting through the fog in his mind. You've been awake before, but never really alive. Her voice cracked, shaking with truth. This is the real world, or what's left of it. Greg spat something bitter under his breath. The penthouse, the empire. It was all a lie, a simulation, a prison. Jonathan's chest tightened. The weight of those words slammed into him. He swallowed hard. So, what am I? What is Max? Sarah's eyes searched his face, pleading. You're not the ghost you were made to be. You're a memory, a code, but that's not all. Greg stepped forward, voice low, urgent. There's something you don't know. Suddenly, the door crashed open. A figure rushed in, battered, bleeding, but alive. A woman. Her face was fierce but worn, streaked with dirt and sweat. Stop! She shouted, voice raw like gravel. He's not who you think. None of us are. Jonathan stared. His heart hammered. The woman's eyes locked onto his with a terrifying intensity. "I'm Emily," she gasped, clutching his sleeve. "I was part of the original program. The real program. The truth you've been buried under." Jonathan blinked. "Program?" Emily nodded, trembling. "You're not a simulation of a man. You're not a man at all. You're a weapon, a collective." A cold silence fell. The words hung there like ice shards. "Collective?" Jonathan's voice cracked. What do you mean?" Emily looked around the room, eyes wild. "You're all pieces. Pieces of thousands of minds. Fragments stitched together. Not just you. Max, Sarah, Greg, all of you." Jonathan's head spun. "Your memories? Fabricated from real people. Brain scans. The original Jonathan never died." Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "He fractured." Jonathan felt a cold wave crash through him. "Fractured?" "Fractured." Emily's gaze hardened. "You, the Jonathan you know, are just one shard. Max is another. Sarah, Greg, all versions, echoes of the same mind. And the real monster is still out there." The room seemed to close around him. Breaths shallow, hearts pounding. Greg stepped closer, trembling. "It's why you never felt whole. Why Max isn't just your son. He's your shadow. And Sarah, she's the one who keeps the pieces from falling apart." Jonathan's mouth went dry. "So, who's the real Jonathan Reed?" Emily swallowed hard, eyes glinting with desperation. "None of us, because he's the one who broke us all. The one still alive and hunting." Before anyone could respond, a flood of static snarled from the flickering lamp. Then the entire room plunged into darkness. A cold, distorted voice whispered through the dark, chilling Jonathan to his core. "He's watching, and he's closer than you think." Silence. Then a single question burned through the black. Which Jonathan will survive, and which one will kill the rest? "He's watching, and he's closer than you think." Silence, thick and heavy as a stone. Then a sudden crash shattered the dark. The door ripped open with a bang, slamming against the wall. Everyone spun around, breath caught, hearts pounding. In the doorway stood a figure. A man, tall, covered in dirt and blood that dripped from ragged clothes. His face was bruised, eyes wild, but burning with a mad kind of energy. Jonathan's chest seized. His mind scrambled to place him, but this wasn't just another version of himself. No, this was someone else. The man stepped forward, his voice hoarse but fierce. "Stop. Stop all of this." Greg's knees buckled, his face pale as the stranger's gaze sliced through the tension like a blade. Who are you?" Jonathan managed to choke out, voice trembling. The man's eyes locked onto Jonathan's with a sharp, painful intensity. "I'm you, the real you, the one you buried beneath lies and code." The room froze. Sarah took a step back, lips parting. shock crashing across her features. Max's cold mask flickered, confusion flashing faintly in his eyes. Jonathan's head spun, heartbeat thundering so loud it drowned the silence. "Wait, what do you mean? I'm here, aren't I? Alive? Real?" Jonathan gasped, struggling for understanding. The stranger stepped closer, shaking his head, voice raw. "No, you aren't alive. Not really. You're a flicker, a shadow built to replace me." Jonathan's breath hitched, stomach twisting into knots. The stranger reached into his coat, pulling out a familiar object, a cracked photo, worn and faded. "Look." Jonathan took it, fingers trembling. It was a picture of a smiling woman, younger, genuine. Her eyes shone with warmth. "Her name was Claire," the stranger said, voice breaking. "Your wife, my wife, your past, our past. You erased her." Jonathan's throat tightened. Faces whirled. Memories jumbled and twisted. Sarah's voice broke the silence. That woman, Claire, she was real, not part of any code. You killed her. Greg gasped, eyes wide, voice shaking. It wasn't programmed. It was murder. Jonathan's knees felt like glass. His body trembled uncontrollably. "What? Why?" he whispered, barely alive. The stranger's eyes burned with a fierce truth. "Because you were afraid. Afraid a life would ruin the plan. So you wiped everything. Every real piece of us, gone." Max's facade cracked open, a flicker of rage and pain flashing in his eyes. "Claire was my mother," he snarled. "You erased her to build me." Shock locked Jonathan's voice away. Breath caught in his chest. The stranger stepped forward, voice lowering to a harsh whisper. "There's more." He pulled a small device from his pocket, his fingers pressing a button. Suddenly, the room flooded with light from hidden screens. Faces appeared, dozens of them. Recordings and images of Claire laughing, living, breathing life. Then, the screens shifted, showing Jonathan. Jonathan, waking up over and over, trapped in a cycle of simulated memories, losing pieces of himself with every reboot. The stranger's voice dropped into a jagged edge. "You're a ghost stuck inside a broken machine. The real Jonathan built you to live his failures. And while you've been chasing shadows, he's been hiding." Silence fell, heavy like a shroud. And then a hand reached slowly out toward Jonathan's face. Not the stranger's hand. Not Sarah, Greg, or Max. His own. His hand was trembling, shaking, moving like someone else's. And suddenly, the world cracked open. Jonathan's vision shattered into a flood of flashes. Scenes from a life he never lived. Claire's smile, a child laughing, warmth and hope. Then, darkness, blood, betrayal. Then a new image, a cold lab, machines humming, a voice, his own, but distorted, commanding endless resets. Jonathan gasped, pressing his hands to his temples, pain stabbing deep. "No," he choked. The stranger stepped closer. "This isn't just one story. It's several, layered like nightmares inside nightmares. The real you isn't here, never was. You were supposed to replace him, but something cracked. Jonathan's eyes darted wildly between the room, the flickering faces, the haunting echoes of a life stolen. And then, a voice, soft but piercing, broke through the chaos. You're not the last Jonathan, or the only one. All eyes snapped to the dark corner. From the shadows emerged a small, trembling figure, an old woman, bent with age but fierce-eyed. Her voice shook, raw with pain. I created you all. The pieces, the simulations, the lies. A gasp echoed around the room. Jonathan staggered forward, heart catching. Why? He whispered. She looked at him, tears spilling free. Because the real war was never outside. It was inside us. Each Jonathan, each face, is a prisoner of my making. A last hope trapped in an endless lie. Silence swallowed the room again. Then the old woman smiled, fragile but terrifying. But there's one truth left. One final piece you don't know. One that will break the whole world apart. Jonathan's breath froze. What is it? He whispered, voice barely there. She leaned in close, voice cracking like ice. You're not the man trying to wake up. Her eyes locked onto his. You're the experiment and the destroyer. And with that, everything collapsed into darkness. A single question hung in the air. Who was the real threat all along? And could anyone escape the destruction they were born to bring? The old woman's words hung heavy in the air. Jonathan's breath hitched. His hands shook like he'd grabbed onto thin ice about to crack. You're the experiment and the destroyer. He wanted to scream, to break the silence, but his throat clamped shut and his heart hammered so loud it drowned out everything. Then, the faintest sound, soft at first but growing. A whisper curling through the room. It wasn't Sarah or Greg or Max. It wasn't the stranger, or even the old woman. It came from inside Jonathan himself. A voice. His own? No. Something deeper, darker. Wake up! The lights flickered violently. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing. Then, crash! The floor cracked beneath them. Dust exploded into the air. Everyone stumbled backward, eyes wide. Jonathan's world blurred as the floor split open like a wound. And from the gap, a chilling, terrible truth tumbled out. Not another man. Not a machine or shadow. But a child. Small. Naked. Shivering. Eyes bright as burning embers. Jonathan's jaw dropped as the child looked up. Dad? The voice cut through the chaos like a knife. Clear, real, heart-wrenching. Jonathan froze. Every breath stopped. Because those eyes, that voice, they were his. The room scrambled, chaos erupting as everyone stared, stunned, silent. Greg stepped forward, wiping sweat from his brow. "No, that can't be. You're just a glitch, a fragment, a nightmare made flesh." But the child smiled, a slow, terrifying smile that no child should carry. "Glitch? Fragment?" The voice was soft, but full of threat. "I'm the real one, the one you buried under lies." Jonathan's heart twisted into a tight knot. Sarah gasped, hand over her mouth. Max's cold mask shattered utterly. The stranger's eyes burned with understanding and fear. The child's smile spread wider. "I've been waiting, while you all lived your fake lives, while you chased shadows. I never left. I was hiding inside you, waiting for the moment you all forgot me." The old woman's face crumbled. "No, no, that's impossible." But the child's face shifted, changed, blurring, splitting. Jonathan caught a flicker, something monstrous beneath the skin. Not a child, not a son. A broken mirror reflecting every broken piece of himself. The child stepped forward, voice rising, cracking the walls. "I'm the truth, the beginning and end, the real Jonathan Reed." Silence screamed. Jonathan's knees buckled. He collapsed, chest tight, lungs burning. Then, "What am I?" The words barely escaped his lips, raw and broken. The child leaned closer, eyes glowing with cold fire. "You're the lie, a mask I wore. But now I'm here, and everything changes." Outside, somewhere far below, the city howled, oblivious. Inside, walls shook with the weight of a secret no one was ready to face. Jonathan looked up, voice barely a whisper. Who am I now?" The child smiled, and the room went black. No answers, only the pulse of a new nightmare awakening. And a question burning like acid. Who created the real monster? Jonathan's eyes fixed on the child's glowing stare. Heart hammering so loud, it felt like it would explode. The room was dead silent, thick with the weight of that one impossible truth. Then, the child's lips curled into that slow, terrifying smile. "You're the lie," the child said again, voice cold as ice. "But I'm the real one now." Jonathan barely breathed. His hands trembled. The floor beneath seemed to pulse. Everything was shifting. Suddenly, the child stepped forward, and the whole room shuddered. Then a crack like thunder tore through the air. The walls flickered. A blinding light exploded from the child's chest, ripping through his tiny body like a wildfire. Everyone shouted. Sarah gasped. Greg stumbled backward. The stranger's eyes widened. Jonathan scrambled, heart in his throat. But the light wasn't just light. It wasn't just fire. It was memory, flashing, shattering, consuming everything. And then it hit Jonathan like a punch to the gut. He was the child, not the ghost on the table, not the fractured versions splitting the air. He was the original. The child and the man were the same. Everything twisted inside Jonathan's mind. He looked down at the child's burning chest And there, buried like a secret, was his own face. A face he never remembered. A face that never existed until now. Slowly, the child's body began to dissolve, flesh melting into glimmering code, raw data, streaming like a river down into the floor, leaking through the cracks, infecting everything. Sarah screamed, dropping to her knees, tears flooding her face. No, you can't erase him. Greg grabbed her arm, but she pulled away, desperate, lost. Jonathan's breath caught as the child's last image, his own innocent, terrified face, flickered one last time. Then, darkness. But before the silence could settle, a cold voice pierced the night. Not from the child, not from anyone in the room. From under the floor. System error detected. Reboot sequence aborted. The lights snapped on violently. The flickering monitors crashed to life, screens flooding with lines of code and red warnings. The old woman stared, wide-eyed. No, this wasn't supposed to happen. Jonathan stood frozen, chest tight, struggling to breathe. Then, out of nowhere, the floor cracked open like a wound, this time wider, deeper, and the ground below revealed a cavernous, endless space filled with glowing machines, spinning faster, veins of light pulsing everywhere. From the depths, a voice echoed, cold and unyielding. You've all been wrong. The lights dimmed, and a figure emerged from the shadows. Not Sarah, not Max, not Greg, not the stranger, but a woman. Young, fierce, her eyes sharp and burning with a deadly clarity Jonathan couldn't place. She stepped forward, every movement deliberate, relentless. I am the real creator, she said, voice slicing through the tension. Jonathan's head snapped up. His throat went dry. You? Who are you? She smiled, without warmth. The one who built this entire simulation. The puppet show you've all been trapped in. He stumbled, heart pounding. But why? Why trap us here? She leaned in, whisper low and cruel. Because you, all of you, are the experiment, not the result, the test subject. The prototype was never the real goal. Jonathan's knees buckled. The room tilted. She raised a hand, and suddenly the screens flashed with images, countless versions of Jonathan, scattered across countless layers of reality, all broken, shattered. All of you, she said, voice ringing, are me. Every face in that room, twisted in shock and horror. Jonathan's own fingers dug into the metal table, nails breaking skin. She stepped closer, eyes locked onto his. I built you, not to watch, not to replace, but to contain. He swallowed hard, pain exploding in his chest. Contain what? She smiled again, sharp, dangerous. The truth you bury deep inside yourself. A sudden, sharp crack split the floor once more. From the depths, a monstrous roar echoed, something alive and angry. Jonathan gasped. Your nightmare isn't over. It's only just beginning. The room plunged into darkness again, and this time, Jonathan knew the real monster wasn't outside. It was inside him all along, waiting to wake. Who was the real prisoner? And who held the key? The air inside the room was thick, too thick. Jonathan's chest tightened like someone had wrapped iron bands around it. His hands trembled, sweat slick and cold against his skin. The machines blinked wildly, screens flooding with red warnings as the lights flickered one last time. The woman, the real creator, stood still, eyes sharp as knives. This ends now. No one moved. No one dared. Then, the floor cracked open again, jagged and deep. From the shadows rose a trembling figure, small, fragile. But this time, Jonathan saw something new, a flicker of fear. "I'm done running," the child said, voice barely a whisper, but fierce. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jonathan stepped forward, every step heavy, raw. "Who are you, really?" The child's eyes glowed with something that wasn't just fire. It was sorrow. It was truth. "I'm what you buried, the part you tried to create but couldn't control. The real you, the pain, the anger, the love, all tangled into one. Silence crushed them." Sarah wiped tears free, voice cracking. "Then maybe there's still a chance." Greg looked broken, but hopeful. "The system can be shut down. The lies can end." The stranger, older, scarred, nodded slowly. "We can fight this, together." Jonathan's throat felt raw, his heartbeat pounding like thunder. The room pulsed with tension, a war between ghosts and truth. Then the woman who built it all straightened, a shadow crossing her face. "If you pull this thread, if you break the system, the whole world could collapse. All of you, gone." Jonathan's breath caught. The choice slammed into him like a freight train. Destroy the cage and risk everything, or live trapped forever in lies and shadows. His eyes flicked around the room, faces haunted, waiting. Then he looked down at the child, the glowing ember once lost inside him. He swallowed thick. "We burn it down. All of it." There was a breath, a long held-in breath. The buttons were pressed, devices deactivated one by one. Lights snapped off. Darkness swallowed them whole. A rumble shook the ground beneath as the cold metal cage cracked and fell away. In the blackness, voices rose. Not whispers this time, but something raw, broken, alive. A scream, a shout, then silence. Gentle light flickered on, a dawn of sorts. Weak, but growing. Jonathan's hand found the child's, fingers curling tight. "We start over," the child said with a fierce calm. "No promises, no easy answers, just the weight of raw beginnings." Outside, the city breathed beneath the windows, unaware. But here, in the ruins of lies, something real stirred. Jonathan blinked. His chest loosened, just a little. The nightmare hadn't ended, but the fight had begun. All right, listen, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe now. Don't miss what's coming next. Exclusive stories that'll blow your mind wide open. Smash the like button right now to feed the algorithm. Every click counts. Flood the comments with your reactions, your crazy theories about how this all ended. I want to hear everything. And do not wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who have to see how it wraps up. Only the true fans understand how important it is to stand by this channel. So go, subscribe, like, comment, share, because the next story could change everything.